back to fill in the blanks, and boy, have I got an interesting guest today. This is Judge Rosemarie Aquilina. Let me just introduce her for a while, and then I'll talk to her in a second. She is a judge in Michigan. She earned her law degree from the Thomas M. Cooley Law School in 1984. She got her bachelor's degree from Michigan State University in 79. So she's been doing this for a while. She served as a 55th District Court judge for 4 years and then has been elected as a 30th Circuit Court judge in Ingham County in November of '08. And she retired honorably from the Michigan Army National Guard after 20 years of service. She was the first female JAG officer in the Michigan Army National Guard, also the most requested JAG officer of all time, not by accident. We'll talk about that in a minute. She served as administrative assistant to State Senator John F. Kelly for 10 years. And she actually hosted Ask the Family Lawyer, which was a syndicated show. She is a published author. She has fictional novels, Feel No Evil, Triple Cross Killer, and All Rise. We'll talk about those in a minute, too. She's got a memoir coming out real soon called Just Watch Me. That was not a title picked at random, which we'll get into as well. She's currently an adjunct professor at the Thomas M. Cooley Law School and Michigan State University School of Law. So needless to say, she is more than a little busy. So, Judge, thank you. You've been a really important part of the show, Dr. Phil, and I took this opportunity to glom onto you and get you to sit down and talk to us more about you and let people get to know you a little better, because people love it when you're on, as you probably know.
Well, I love being on, but more important, I love that you love people and messaging and trying to fix the world. And so your show is just instrumental in change. And I am honored that you asked me to be on that and on this podcast. So thank you.
Well, you speak right up, and I love that. You say what you think. You're very thoughtful in what you do. And, there's something in your courtroom that I really admire, and that is you let people speak. You let people say what they want to think. That bothers some people, I guess, because you let people speak whether everybody thinks they should have a voice or not. But you kind of let everybody talk, right?
Well, it's my belief that it's not my courtroom. And a lot of judges believe it's their courtroom, their way, no matter what. I believe it's the people's court, and the people have a right to voice in on whatever case affects them. And I give them all the time they need. And learning what they have to say helps me be a better judge, because it's that backstory that makes the story, that helps me make a decision. And I don't listen to the naysayers. And I have to say, I appreciate that you appreciate my voice, because so many people don't want me to speak up. And when I do, put me down. And I keep speaking up because no one puts me in a corner. No one tells me to shut up and stay quiet. But it's a hard road to travel for a woman to be outspoken.
Yeah, and I know that's true, particularly in the legal profession. And I want to talk about that some. If people are wondering, do I know her? Probably most people know you from presiding over the Dr. Larry Nassar case. That's not the only thing you've done of note in your career, and I don't want to typecast you in that way, but if people are saying, where do I know her from? You presided over the Larry Nassar case, and if you're trying to place his name, he's the doctor, and I use that term loosely, who abused so many of the gymnasts, and I guess it's still on appeal, so you could say he's been found to have abused them, and although that's under appeal, but the U.S. Olympic gymnast and a whole lot of other gymnasts, you presided over that case. How long did it last?
I allowed them to speak for 7 days. He pled, And then the sentencing took 7 days because that many women came forward. We expected first about 20, and then it turned to 40, and ultimately 156 sister survivors, as I dubbed them, spoke, and 169 spoke altogether. And I think the number now is about 505 people who've come forward.
Wow, that's just amazing. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if you're trying to place the judge other than on our show, that's probably where you would know her from the most. And I thought, I spent most of my professional career in the litigation arena. As you know, I've been in front of more judges than you can shake a stick at. And I thought you did a masterful job in that case. I'm not saying that because you're sitting here. I thought it was even-handed. I thought you let him speak. I thought you let people speak to him at the time, and I said so publicly at the time, and this was before I had the pleasure of meeting you. I said publicly, I thought you did a masterful job in navigating the terrain of that case, and I thought you gave everybody their day in court, their opportunity to speak. So we'll talk more about that in a minute, but your parents immigrated to the U.S., right? To Detroit?
Yeah, my grandparents emigrated from Malta with their 5 children. My father was the oldest. And then they became citizens. My father then joined the U.S. Army and served in the Korean War, and then went to Germany to medical school on the GI Bill. Met my mother, who was German. They had lost everything through Hitler, took everything from my grandparents, and were very, very poor. And my mother ended up being a governess in Spain. And they met on a train in Germany,
Really?
exchanged phone numbers, and a year later were married. I was conceived 11 months and 2 days later. My brother was conceived. And of course, my dad could not study with 2 crying babies. So my brother and I emigrated with my mother to live with my grandparents in Detroit. And we came over stateless because at that time, Germany only recognized the citizenship of the father, and the United States did not allow my father to transfer his citizenship because he had not yet been a citizen for 10 years. Now, all of that's changed, but my brother and I are naturalized, and we came over with stateless stamped across our baby pictures.
Wow. But your father did naturalize eventually.
He did. He was a citizen when he served, but he could
Yeah.
not pass his citizenship on for 10 years at that time.
Yeah. So he served in the Korean War, and he went to medical school in Germany, right?
Yes, and then when he specialized, he came back to the United States and did his specialty there. He is a urologist.
Yeah. And you thought your grandparents were your mom and dad, right? They raised you.
So people don't really think about children as having a voice, I think. And when my mother would work downtown Detroit, send the money back to my father, we lived with my grandparents. When my mother came home after working, I thought she was more like my sister rescuing me from my parents, who my grandmother had been yelling at me, don't do this, don't do that, whatever, as little kids. And I would get up every morning with my grandfather, who worked at Ford, at 5, 6 o'clock, and have some coffee and toast with him. And my uncle, who was the youngest child of theirs, was in high school, calling them mom and dad. So I called them Nunnu and Nunna, which means grandmother and grandfather in Maltese, but I equated it with mom and dad because they did everything for me.
Yeah.
So 5 years later, and I only saw my dad once a year. 5 years later, my dad comes back and they put us in a car and they take us away. And I felt kidnapped because no one told me. Now, still to this day, my family will tell me that I'm stupid, that I didn't know. And how could I think that my grandparents were my parents? But you have to talk to little kids because it's the connotation of what they do for you every day that makes the word.
Yeah. But when you're 5 years old, you know what's in front of you. You live moment to moment, and you know what you experience, right? That's that anonymous poem, Children Learn What They Live. It's just what you experience. That's what you know.
Right. Yeah. They were my parents. So I now look at it that I was blessed to have 2 sets of parents. But let me just tell you that feeling that you've been kidnapped since you were 5 makes you fight for everything.
Yeah. And you said that's why you've always been interested in the backstory of the people that come before you. You wanna know their frame of reference, what they grew up with, how they got to be who they are.
Right. Not everybody has a mommy and daddy like, you or I. Not everybody um, can go to school. Not everybody understands the world around them. Or if they do, it's from a cultural perspective or a street perspective, or they were abused and that changed their perspective. So it's that backstory that really enlightens me on how best to sentence them, rehabilitate them, and make sure that at the end of their journey with me, they are whole, if they can be, or maybe they need to be sent to prison. But it's the backstory that makes the story, and it's interesting that way.
Yeah, you listen to see who they are, where they came from, as an explanation for maybe why they did what they did instead of just what they did.
Right, because oftentimes I find there's mental illness. They might be a drug addict, but why are they a drug addict? It might be because they were assaulted or abused in some way and they want to shove it down. It also might be that it's an untreated mental illness. So if I can get them the right medication, the right doctors, then guess what? They are rehabilitated and they don't use the cocaine or heroin or whatever they're using. We have to look at the backstory to find the solution that we're dealing with today.
Well, now that takes a lot more time to listen and figure out who they are and to do a real pre-sentencing study and know who's in front of you. But when you do that, are you more confident in the sentences that you hand down?
Yes, and I also know it works because I live in the community where I work, and I have people come up to me no matter where I am and tell me, "You saved my son's life. You saved my life. I didn't know I was going through that. How did you see it?" And I know it works, and I see the recidivism rate, at least of many of the people in front of me, go down. And I don't care if I deal with one case for a week or 10 cases in a day. I'm not done with that case until I'm done with that case. The only thing that's in front of me is that one particular case. I believe that is what judges are supposed to do. I know that's not always popular. I know that I get complaints that I spend too much time talking to people, and I don't care. If you don't have time to be in my courtroom, reschedule or leave. I'm not going to leave until I'm done, until I have that information.
Mhm. Does it bother you to have to pass down a judgment and a sentence on people day after day after day? Because I know you send a lot of people to prison, you send a lot of people to jail, you revoke probation. Sometimes there are people that in the moment are highly remorseful. They stand before you and cry and plead and beg and all that. You still have to make that hard decision to say, "No, you did what you did, and you're gonna have to pay for it."
When you listen to the backstory, when you listen to the victim, when you do your work, when you listen to defendant, and you have all the pieces and you really take the time, my decisions don't bother me. And oftentimes the Department of Corrections will say this person must go to prison. And I will say, no. They might have 37 charges, but most of these are drug related. They've never been sent to rehab. How is that possible? We failed. So I try. And either they succeed or then they can go to prison. But we are dealing with human beings. And I try to make good decisions and I sleep well at night because of that. It's important.